My name is Leo, and the idea was mine. Wildmount Peak, infamous for its beauty and treacherous weather shifts. Alex, the thrill seeker. Ben, our rock. Sarah, the meticulous planner. And me, Leo, the instigator. We packed gear, fueled by excitement and camaraderie. The plan was simple. Summit, camp near Eagle's Crag, descend. Ben double-checked supplies. Sarah reviewed the map. Alex joked about bears. I felt the familiar buzz of the trail started gentle, winding through fragrant pines. Sunlight dappled the path. Alex bounded ahead. Ben maintained a steady pace. Sarah noted landmarks, and I soaked it in. Laughter echoed. By midday, the incline sharpened. Breath grew ragged. Packs felt heavier. Conversation faded into focused steps. The air cooled. We reached the tree line as dusk painted the sky orange and purple. Eagle's Crag loomed darkly above Dot. We found a flattish clearing, sheltered somewhat by the crag's overhang. Tents went up quickly, practiced motions in the fading light. A small campfire crackled, pushing back the mountain's chill. We ate rehydrated. Meals sharing stories. Alex pointed out constellations emerging in the ink-black sky. Sarah voiced a slight unease about the wind picking up, but Ben reassured us. The crag felt watchful. Dot's sleep was fitful. The wind howled like voices arguing. Just beyond the firelight, strange scratching sounds seemed to come from the rocks above our tents. I dismissed it as loose scree or an animal. Alex joked nervously about mountain spirits. Sarah checked her compass repeatedly, frowning. Ben remained stoic, stoking the fire. A deep, unnatural silence fell just before dawn, heavy and unsettling. Morning brought thick, swirling mist. Visibility dropped to meters. We decided to wait it out, but Alex grew restless. I'm just scouting the route up to the crag's base, he insisted, ignoring Sarah's protests. He vanished into the gray. Minutes later, a short, sharp cry cut through the fog, followed by the terrible, echoing clatter of rocks falling. We called. His name, frantic. Only the wind the mist clung stubbornly. We roped together, moving with agonizing slowness towards the sound's origin. Ben led, probing the ground ahead. Sarah's face was pale, her knuckles white on the rope. We found disturbed gravel near a sheer drop-off. Alex's water bottle lay cracked on a ledge below. Peering over, we saw nothing but swirling gray depths. Alex was gone. Shock and grief settled like ice. Arguments erupted. Sarah wanted an immediate descent. Ben argued it was too dangerous in the fog. We needed to wait for clearer weather and signal for help. I felt paralyzed, guilt gnawing at me. It was my trip, my fault. We compromised. Wait a few hours for the U. Fog to lift, then descend. The camp felt haunted by Alex's absence. His tent flapped emptily in the wind. The fog thinned slightly around noon. We broke camp in grim silence. Ben took point on the descent, moving with extra caution. The path was slick with moisture. Near a notoriously narrow traverse, Ben paused to secure a rope anchor. A large, rain-loosened rock, hidden by the lingering mist, gave way under his boot. He stumbled backwards with a grunt, arms flailing for purchase, and vanished silently over the edge before Sarah or I could react. The rope snaked after him into the void. Sarah screamed Ben's name, the sound raw and tearing. I stood frozen, staring at the spot where he'd been. 2 friends gone, 2 accidents. Coincidence felt like a flimsy shield against the crushing fear. The mountain seemed hostile, the crag a malevolent sentinel. Sarah slumped to the ground, shaking. The fog closed back in, thicker than before. We were utterly. Sarah barely spoke. Shock had hollowed her out. We huddled together off the path, too terrified to move further in the fog. She kept glancing towards the crag, whispering, "It wasn't right. Ben's footing, ... It wasn't right." Paranoia took root. Every sound was amplified. The wind, shifting rocks, our own ragged breaths. Trust frayed. Who was next? What unseen force was at work? The temperature plummeted as night fell again. We had no tent, only emergency blankets. Hypothermia became a real threat. Sarah started shivering violently. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the dark shape of the crag. "It's here," she murmured, her teeth chattering. "Can't you feel it?" Watching, waiting. I tried to rub warmth into her arms, but a deep, irrational dread told me she was right. Something was wrong with this mountain. Dawn broke, clear and bitterly. Cold. Sarah was lethargic, her skin alarmingly pale. We had to move or freeze. We started down, Sarah moving like a sleepwalker. Near a frozen stream crossing, she stopped. "Leo," she said, her voice strangely calm. "Look out." She shoved me, hard backwards. I landed heavily as a section of ice Sarah had been standing on cracked and gave way with a sickening crunch. The freezing current swallowed her instantly. Her hand broke the surface once, grasping, then disappeared downstream under the ice shelf. Silence. Deafening. Absolute silence. I lay in the snow, staring at the hole in the ice. Sarah was gone. Sacrifice? Accident? Or something else? I was alone. Wild Mount Peak had claimed Alex, Ben, and Sarah. Panic surged, then a chilling numbness. I scrambled away from the stream, back towards higher ground, towards the only landmark I knew, Eagle's Crag. It felt like the only solid thing left, even as it radiated menace. I reached the base of Eagle's Crag as the sun dipped low again. Exhaustion and despair weighed me down. There was no sign of help. Sitting with my back against the cold rock, I heard them. Not the wind. Whispers. Faint, layered voices seeming to come from the stone itself. Alex's laugh, Ben's reassurance, Sarah's final warning. They swirled around me, not comforting, but accusatory, hungry. The crag wasn't just rock. It was ancient, aware, feeding on the fear, the life, the endings of those drawn to its slopes. Alex's fall, Ben's slip, Sarah through the ice. Accidents carefully curated. And now it had me, trapped, waiting. The whispers grew louder, filling my head, promising I wouldn't leave the mountain. The last sound wasn't my own scream, but the satisfied sigh of the stone as the cold and the voices finally claimed me too. Wild Mount Peak had its fourth. The silence of Hemlock Pines wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, watchful. My boots crunched on the thick carpet of pine needles, the only sound in the oppressive quiet. I'd come for solitude, to escape the city's noise, but this felt different, deeper, older. Sunlight struggled through the dense canopy, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to move just out of the corner of my eye. I followed an old deer trail, promising myself I'd turn back before dusk. Then I heard it, not a bird, not an animal, a whisper, faint like dry leaves skittering over stone. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, syllables lost in the rustle of high branches. Stay, ... or was it stray? ... I stopped, heart hammering against my ribs. The forest held its breath. Nothing. Just the oppressive silence again, heavier than before. I told myself it was the wind, but the air was utterly still. I quickened my pace, the whispering path urging me deeper. The trail ended abruptly at a clearing dominated by a massive, lightning-blasted oak. Its hollow center gaped like a rotten mouth. The whispering was louder here, a susurrus of dry voices overlapping. Lost. Hungry. Come closer. A chill, deeper than the forest shade, seeped from the hollow. It smelled wrong too, damp. Earth mixed with something sickly sweet, like decaying fruit left too long in the sun. I backed away, but roots seemed to snag at my ankles. A low growl vibrated through the ground, not from an animal throat, but from the earth itself. Shadows pooled unnaturally around the hollow tree, deepening into an absolute blackness that seemed to pulse. Something Wetchermar that darkness. Not eyes, but a palpable, ravenous attention. The whispers intensified, becoming a chorus of insistent, gnawing hunger. Panic seized me. I tore my foot free and stumbled back onto the path, running blindly. The whispers chased me, a cold breath only. Ran until my lungs burned, collapsing against a moss-covered boulder. The whispering faded, replaced by the frantic drumming of my own heart. Dusk was falling, painting the forest in shades of bruise purple and deep green. I needed to get out. Now, fumbling for my compass, I found it spinning wildly, useless, looking. Up, I scanned the familiar landmarks I'd noted earlier. The split rock, gone. The twisted pine, nowhere to be seen. The trees themselves seemed subtly rearranged, leaning inwards, blocking familiar sight lines. I was impossibly lost. That's when I saw it on the boulder beside me. 3 deep, parallel gouges in the moss, like claw marks, but too large, too widely spaced for any animal I knew. Fresh sap oozed from the cuts in the stone beneath. It hadn't been there when I leaned. Against it, cold dread pooled in my stomach. I was being hunted, marked. A thick, unnatural fog began to seep from the forest floor, cold and clinging, smelling of wet stone and that same underlying sweetness. Visibility dropped to mere feet. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every creak of a branch became a potential threat. The silence returned, but it was the silence of a predator holding its breath. Then I heard it, a heavy, dragging sound, like something massive pulling itself over roots and rocks. Thump. Drag. It was slow, deliberate, getting closer. I pressed myself against a tree trunk, trying to vanish into the bark. The dragging stopped nearby. The fog swirled, thinning momentarily. Through the haze, I saw a shape. It was vaguely humanoid, but wrong. Impossibly tall, limbs too long, and jointed at unnatural angles. Its skin looked like bark and shadow woven together. Where a face should have been was only a deeper darkness, a void that seemed to suck in the fading light. It didn't turn, but I felt its awareness lock onto me. That gnawing hunger intensified, a physical pressure in the air. It took a step towards my hiding place. Flight instinct screamed. I bolted, crashing through ferns and low branches, the fog, swirling around me like grasping hands. Behind me, the dragging sound erupted into a furious, tearing scramble, branches snapping like gunshots. It was fast, horrifyingly fast. I ran on pure terror, the world a blur of gray fog and dark trunks. Suddenly, the ground vanished beneath my feet. I tumbled down a steep, leaf-strewn embankment, landing hard in a shallow creek bed. Pain lanced through my ankle. Above on the ridge, the thing loomed, a monstrous silhouette against the foggy gloom. It let out a sound, not a roar, but a low, resonant hum that vibrated in my bones and made the very stones tremble. It was the sound of the hollow oak amplified, the sound of ancient, ravenous earth. Scrambling to my feet, ignoring the pain, I splashed downstream. The hum followed, echoing through the ravine, seeming to come from the water, the rocks, the air. Itself, I saw a sliver of lighter gray ahead, the forest edge. Pushing my burning legs harder, I burst through a final thicket of brambles, and stumbled onto a gravel logging road. I didn't look back. I limped down the road, the hum slowly fading, but not disappearing. It echoed in my head, a phantom vibration. Even as I reached my car, miles away, the silence of the normal world felt thin, fragile. The oppressive quiet of Hemlock Pines had followed me out. The whispers had stopped, replaced by that deep, resonant hum, the hollow echo of something. Ancient, something hungry, and something that knew I had escaped ... For now, the forest hadn't finished with me. I could still feel its cold breath on my neck, hear its hunger in the quiet spaces between my own frantic heartbeats. The fire popped, sending a shower of orange embers swirling upwards into the vast, cold velvet of the night sky. Below us, the valley was a pit of absolute darkness. Above, the stars were unnervingly bright, sharp pinpricks in the black dome. Constellations I didn't recognize seeming to pulse with a faint, cold light. The air was thin, crisp, and carried the scent of pine resin, damp earth, and something else. Something metallic, like old blood or ozone. Think we're completely alone up here, Mark? Sarah asked, her voice small against the immense silence of the Rockies. She pulled her fleece tighter around her, her eyes darting towards the wall of shadows that began just beyond the reach of our firelight. The towering pines stood like sentinels, their branches sighing in a wind we couldn't feel down here. Gottmark poked the fire with a long stick, sending another cascade of sparks flying. That's the point, isn't it? Miles from anyone. Just us, the bears, and maybe a curious moose. He tried to sound reassuring, but I saw the tension in his jaw. The silence was oppressive. It wasn't peaceful. It felt watchful. I shifted on the log, the rough bark digging into my thighs. Feels different tonight, I murmured, scanning the tree line. My flashlight beam, when I swept it nervously across the nearest trunks, seemed feeble, swallowed almost. Instantly by the consuming dark. Too quiet. Even the crickets had stopped. Sarah nodded vigorously. Exactly. It's like everything's holding its breath. She pointed towards the eastern ridge, a jagged black silhouette against the slightly less dark sky. Did you see that flicker? Like lightning, but no thunder. And blue, not white. We all looked. Nothing. Just the oppressive blackness. Mark chuckled, but it sounded forced. Probably just a satellite, Sarah. Or your eyes playing tricks. Thin. Air, remember? But I had seen it too. A brief, silent pulse of sickly blue-white light, high on the ridge, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. No sound. It hadn't felt technological. It felt alive. Wrong dot, then came the sound. Not loud, but distinct in the unnatural hush. A sharp crack, like a thick branch snapping under immense weight, somewhere upslope to our north. Too heavy for a deer. Too deliberate for falling debris. Out we froze. The fire's cheerful crackle suddenly seemed obscenely loud. My hand instinctively went to the hunting knife sheathed on my belt. Mark slowly lowered his stick, his eyes fixed on the direction of the sound. Sarah's breath hitched. Silence descended. Again, heavier than before. Minutes stretched. Just as we began to exhale, to exchange nervous glances, it happened. A low growl vibrated through the ground. Not through the air, through the ground itself. It was guttural, ancient, and filled with a malice that froze the blood in my veins. It came from multiple directions at once, seeming to emanate from the mountain's very bones. Before we could react, shapes detached from the deeper shadows under the pines. They were tall, impossibly slender, moving with a disjointed insecta, gait that defied the human eye. Moonlight, when it caught them fleetingly, revealed skin like polished obsidian, reflecting the stars in fractured, terrifying patterns. Their limbs seemed too long, bending in places limbs shouldn't bend. And their eyes, oh God, their eyes, not reflections. They glowed with a cold silver light, like chips of frozen mercury fixed unblinkingly on our camp. They didn't rush. They flowed forward, silent as smoke, surrounding the meager circle of firelight. 10? 15? More? Impossible to tell in the shifting dark. They carried no weapons we recognized, only long, cruel-looking talons that gleamed wickedly, and strange, organic-looking protrusions from their limbs that hummed faintly with that same blue-white energy. Panic, pure and primal, seized me. "Get back," I yelled, my voice cracking. I scrambled backwards, knocking over my water bottle. Mark roared, a sound of pure terror and defiance, and grabbed the biggest burning log from the fire, brandishing it like a torch. Sarah screamed, a raw sound that tore through the night. The creatures paused at the edge of the firelight, their silver eyes fixed on the flames Mark held. They tilted their heads in unison, a disturbingly bird-like gesture. One, slightly taller, its head adorned with bony ridges, took a step closer. Its mouth, a lipless slash, opened slightly, revealing needle-sharp teeth. A sound emerged, not a growl, not a hiss, but a series of rapid, clicking pops and a low, subsonic thrum that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Then, from high above, on the ridge where we'd seen the blue light, came a different sound. A sharp, echoing crack that split the night. Not thunder. Not a branch. Gunfire distant, but unmistakable. Automatic weapons fire, followed by a deeper, concussive hump that shook the ground. An explosion. The creatures reacted instantly. Their heads snapped towards the ridge, the silver eyes blazing brighter. The clicking intensified, becoming frantic. The tall one let out a high-pitched shriek that scraped against my eardrums. They weren't looking at us anymore. They were looking. Up suddenly, the night sky above the ridge lit up. Not with stars, but with streaks of fire, tracer rounds arcing through the darkness. More explosions bloomed, orange and white flowers of destruction blossoming against the black rock face. The deep whomp-off heavy ordnance echoed through the valleys, followed by the rapid staccato chatter of machine guns and the sharper cracks of rifles. A battle. A full-scale battle was raging high above our campsite. The creatures surrounding us shrieked again, a sound of fury and alarm. They turned away from our fire, their forms seeming to shimmer and fade into the darkness as they moved with impossible speed towards the ridge, towards the sounds of war. In seconds, they were gone, vanished into the trees as if they'd never been there. Mark dropped the burning log, his face ashen in the firelight, staring up at the fiery chaos on the ridge. Sarah was sobbing uncontrollably, curled into a ball. I stood frozen, knife still uselessly clutched in my hand, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sounds of the battle intensified, the crump of mortar, the scream of something that sounded like no engine I'd ever heard, the inhuman shrieks that now mixed with the gunfire. Flares burst high above the ridge, casting an eerie, hellish glow over the entire mountainside, illuminating plumes of smoke and dust. We weren't alone on the mountain. And the war we'd stumbled into wasn't between humans. It was between humans. And them, and our camp was directly in the middle. The fire was dying. Mark frantically threw on the last of our dry wood, but it only bought us minutes. The meager flames seemed pathetic against the backdrop of the raging battle above, and the suffocating darkness pressing in from all sides. The ridge was a nightmare. Diorama, flashes of gunfire lit the undersides of smoke plumes. Tracer fire stitched fiery lines across the sky, and the deep booms of explosions sent tremors through the ground that vibrated up our legs. They left, Sarah whispered, her voice raw. Why did they leave? They saw bigger prey, Mark rasped, his eyes glued to the ridge. He clutched the heavy flashlight like a club now, the firebrand discarded. Or we were just insignificant bait. Or we're still in their territory, I said, my voice tight. I kept sweeping my own flashlight beam into the trees, seeing nothing but shifting shadows and the skeletal outlines of branches. Every rustle of wind, every settling log in the fire, made me jerk. The creature's departure felt less like salvation and more like a temporary reprieve. They know we're here. They smelled us. The sounds of battle were changing. The initial fury of gunfire was becoming more sporadic, punctuated by those chilling, high-pitched shrieks that seemed closer now, echoing down the slopes towards us. There were human shouts, too, distant and desperate, often cut short. The deep, unnatural thrumming sound we'd heard from the creatures intensified, sometimes accompanied by a flash of that same blue-white energy lighting up patches of the mountainside below the main ridge. They're losing, Mark stated grimly. The humans up there, they're getting pushed back. A fresh wave of terror washed over us. If the creatures overwhelmed the soldiers on the ridge, where would they go next? Down, towards the valleys. Towards us. Pack. I ordered, the adrenaline cutting through my fear. Grab the essentials. Water, food, first aid kit. Leave the tents. We need to move. Now. We moved like automatons, driven by primal fear, stuffing sleeping bags into packs with trembling hands, grabbing water bottles, energy bars, the small first. Aid pouch. Sarah fumbled with the zipper on her pack, her fingers clumsy. Mark kept watch, flashlight beam jerking erratically across the tree line. Just as I heaved my pack onto my shoulders, a sound froze us again. Not from the ridge, from behind. U.S. From the south, down the trail we'd hiked up that afternoon. A guttural, wet snuffling. Then a low, gurgling growl, entirely different from the creature's earlier sounds. This was heavier, bestial. And it was close. Too close. Mark swung his light. The beam caught 2 pinpoints of reflected red light, low to the ground, maybe 30 yards away, just beyond the first line of trees. Then it illuminated the creature dot. It wasn't like the tall, obsidian beings. This thing was a nightmare of muscle and teeth. It walked on 4 limbs that ended in massive clawed paws, but its hunched shoulders suggested it could rear up. Its hide was thick, leathery, and covered in coarse, matted hair like dirty wire. Its head was massive, almost bear-like, but elongated, with jaws that seemed to split its face in half, revealing rows of yellowed, dripping fangs, and its eyes. Those red eyes burned with mindless hunger. Saliva dripped from its jowls, steaming faintly in the cold air. Jesus Christ! Mark breathed, stepping back, almost stumbling into the fire. The beast snarled, a sound that vibrated in my chest cavity. It lowered its head, muscles bunching under its hide. It wasn't alone. Another pair of red eyes gleamed beside it, then another, deeper in the trees. Hounds. These were the hounds of whatever army was fighting on the ridge. Sarah screamed. The sound seemed to trigger the beasts. The lead one lunged, covering the distance with terrifying speed. A blur of matted fur and snapping jaws aimed straight for Mark. Mark reacted instinctively, swinging the heavy metal flashlight like a bat. It connected with a sickening thud against the beast's shoulder. The creature yelped, a sound more of surprise than pain, and veered off, skidding on the loose scree. But the force knocked the flashlight from Mark's hand, sending it spinning into the darkness. "Get behind the fire," I yelled, drawing my knife, knowing it was laughably inadequate. Sarah scrambled backwards, falling over a log. The other 2 beasts emerged fully, flanking the first, their growls forming a terrifying chorus. The lead beast shook its massive head, those red eyes fixing on Mark again, burning with fury. It charged once more. Mark grabbed the only thing left, the metal pot we'd used for boiling water. He hurled it. It clanged harmlessly off the beast's thick skull. Only enraging it further, it leaped. Mark raised his arms in a futile defense. Time seemed to slow. I saw the drooling maw open wide enough to engulf his head, the glint of fangs in the firelight. A streak of blue-white light sliced through the darkness from above. It hit the leaping beast square in the side. There was no explosion, just a brilliant flash and a sizzling sound. The creature simply disintegrated. One moment it was a mass of muscle and fury. The next it was a cloud of fine, glowing ash that drifted down onto the pine needles. The other two hounds recoiled, yelping in terror, their red eyes wide. They shrank back, cowering. I looked up. Perched impossibly on a thick branch of a pine tree overlooking our camp was one of the obsidian creatures. Tall, slender, its silver eyes fixed not on us, but on the remaining hounds. It held one arm extended, the organic protrusion on its forearm glowing faintly blue, like cooling metal. It made a single, sharp clicking sound. The remaining hounds whimpered, turned, and fled into the darkness, crashing through the undergrowth. The creature on the branch didn't look at us. Its head tilted, listening to the sounds of battle still, raging above. Then, with that same unnerving fluidity, it simply stepped backwards off the branch and melted into the shadows of the higher canopy, vanishing as completely as if it had never been there. Silence crashed back, broken only by the crackle of our dying fire, Mark's ragged breathing, and Sarah's choked sobs. Mark stood frozen, staring at the spot where the hound had vanished. A faint dusting of glowing ash settled near his feet. It saved us? Sarah stammered, disbelief warring with terror. Did it? Mark whispered, his voice trembling. He looked at the glowing ash, then up towards the ridge. Or did it just eliminate the competition? Or protect its property? The implication hung heavy in the air. We weren't just witnesses. We were assets, or prey being saved for later. The act of salvation felt colder, more calculating than any attack. The tall creature hadn't cared about us. It had removed an intruder in its territory. The battle sounds intensified again, sounding closer, more desperate. The sporadic gunfire was now punctuated by the whoosh and crack of what sounded like flamethrowers, and the bone-jarring thump of heavier impacts. The creature's shrieks were sharper, more frequent. The ridge was becoming a slaughterhouse. We can't stay here, I said, forcing my voice to be steady. Fire's almost out. Those hounds might come back. Or worse, where? Sarah asked, her eyes wide with despair. Up there is hell. Down there, she gestured towards the valley, is dark and full of whatever else is hunting tonight. East, Mark said suddenly, pointing away from the ridge and the valley trail, up that smaller slope. Less cover, but maybe we can get above the immediate fight, find a rock outcrop to hide in, see the lay of the land at dawn. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only one we had. Dawn felt like a lifetime away. We doused the last embers of the fire with our remaining water, plunging ourselves into near total darkness. Only the distant hellish glow from the ridge provided any illumination. Shouldering our packs, we moved as quietly as possible, abandoning most of our gear, heading east into the unknown, climbing the steep, rocky slope away from the camp that had become a killing ground, leaving behind only the faint, glowing dust of something that had tried to kill us, and the chilling memory of silver eyes climbing in near total darkness, fueled by terror and the fading echoes of war, was a special kind of torment. Every loose stone underfoot threatened to betray us. Every gnarled root felt like a skeletal hand grasping at our ankles. We scrambled over boulders, our hands scraping raw on the cold, unforgiving granite, our breath ragged gasps in the thin air. The sounds of the battle followed us, sometimes seeming closer as the wind shifted, sometimes fading, but never stopping. The inhuman shrieks, the staccato gunfire, the deep concussive humps, they were the soundtrack of our nightmare. We found a shallow depression beneath an overhanging ledge of rock, shielded from above and offering a narrow view back towards the ridge and the valley below. It wasn't a cave, barely large enough for the three of us to huddle together, shivering not just from the cold, but from shock and exhaustion. We pressed our backs against the cold stone, listening, waiting, watching. The fiery light show on the ridge. Sarah wept silently, her shoulders shaking. Mark kept his eyes fixed on the ridge, his face a mask of grim fascination. I clutched my knife, knuckles white, straining my ears for any sound approaching our meager hiding spot. The metallic scent was stronger here, mixed with the acrid tone of smoke drifting down from above. As the darkest hours of the night wore on, the character of the battle changed. The human gunfire became less frequent, more desperate. The sounds of the creatures, the shrieks, the humming thrum, the sharp cracks of their energy weapons became dominant. Then, around 4 a.m., a new sound joined the cacophony, the deep, rhythmic thudding of heavy helicopter rotors. Searchlights, blindingly bright, speared down from the black sky, sweeping across the ridge, illuminating scenes of utter devastation. Shattered trees, scorched earth, plumes of smoke, and dark, unmoving shapes. The staccato fire from the helicopters, miniguns unleashing torrents of tracers, raked across the ridge, momentarily silencing the creatures' cries. Explosions bloomed where rockets struck. For a brief, heart-lifting moment, it seemed like reinforcements had arrived. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered within me. It died almost instantly. From the forested slopes below the ridge, streaks of blue-white light lanced upwards, silent and deadly. One helicopter searchlight winked out, then the aircraft itself seemed to shudder in mid-air before tilting violently and plunging towards the valley floor in a fiery spiral. Another took a direct hit. There was no explosion, just a sudden bloom of blue light that consumed it, leaving only falling, glowing debris. The minigun fire faltered, then stopped. The creatures weren't just defending the ridge. They were counterattacking. The reinforcements with terrifying efficiency. The remaining helicopters banked sharply, climbing away, their searchlights extinguished, their guns silent. The ridge belonged to the creatures again. Silence descended once more, deeper and more profound than before. The final echoes of the crashing helicopters faded. The gunfire ceased. Even the creatures' shrieks stopped. Only the crackle of burning wreckage in the valley and the moan of the wind through the pines remained. The mountain held its breath, as if stunned by the violence it had witnessed. Slowly, painfully slowly, the black sky began to soften to a deep, bruised purple in the east. Dawn was coming. The stars faded. The ridge, when we dared to look, was a scarred silhouette against the lightening sky. Smoke still curled from its flanks. "We have to move," Mark whispered, his voice hoarse, "before the light makes us easy targets." "Where?" Sarah asked, her voice hollow. "Back down? Into the valley where those hounds were? Or towards them?" She nodded towards the ridge. "Down," I said, forcing conviction I didn't feel. "Back to the main trail. Maybe the army sent ground forces too. Maybe there's a roadblock, a patrol, something." It was a thin hope, but the ridge felt like the heart of darkness. The valley, however terrifying, offered a path away. We crawled out of our rocky shelter, stiff and aching. The world in the gray dawn light was alien and menacing. The familiar pines looked like clawed hands reaching for the sky. The rocks seemed stained with dark patches that could be oil or soot or something else. The metallic smell was pervasive. Picked our way down the slope, moving with agonizing slowness, terrified of making noise, terrified of what we might see. We reached the remnants of our campsite. It was a scene of desolation. Tents shredded, gear scattered and broken. The campfire was a cold circle of ash, and beside it, stark against the gray earth, was the faintly glowing outline of the vaporized hound, like a ghostly chalk mark. We didn't linger. We found the trail and started down, moving as fast as our trembling legs would allow. The forest felt oppressively silent, watchful. Every shadow seemed to hold a pair of silver eyes. We'd been hiking for maybe an hour, the sun just beginning to crest the eastern peaks, casting long, distorted shadows when we heard the engines. Not helicopters, trucks, heavy diesel engines, grinding their way up the Forest Service road that intersected the trail ahead. Relief, so intense it was almost painful, washed over us. We broke into a stumbling run towards the sound. We burst out of the trees onto the gravel, rode just as a convoy of 3 khaki-colored military trucks rounded a bend. Soldiers in full combat gear, faces grim and streaked with dirt, manned heavy. Machine guns mounted on the trucks. They spotted us instantly, weapons snapping towards us. "Stop! Identify yourselves." A soldier barked, his voice amplified through a loudspeaker. "We're campers." I yelled, holding my hands high, the knife long, since sheathed. "We got caught in the fighting. Please." The lead truck stopped. Soldiers jumped down, weapons trained on us cautiously as they approached. Their eyes scanned the trees behind us constantly. They looked exhausted, wired, like men who had seen things they couldn't explain. "Jesus, you 3 look like hell," a sergeant said, lowering his rifle slightly, but keeping his finger near the trigger. His nametag read Harris. "What did you see?" Mark started talking, a torrent of words spilling out. The creatures, the eyes, the hounds, the battle, the helicopters falling. Sarah just nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I added details, describing the obsidian skin, the silver eyes, the energy weapons, the way the creature had disintegrated the hound. Sergeant Harris listened, his expression hardening with each word, but not showing surprise. Just grim confirmation. He exchanged a look with another soldier. "All right," he said when we finished. His voice was flat. "You saw. That makes you a security risk. Get in the back of the middle truck." "Now." "A security risk?" Mark protested. "We just want to get out of here. You saw classified engagement protocols with unidentified hostiles," Harris stated, his voice devoid of warmth. "National security is involved. Get in the truck. We're pulling back to the forward base. You'll be debriefed." The soldiers ushered us roughly towards the truck. As I climbed into the dark, canvas-covered bed, I glanced back one last time at the mountain. The rising sun painted its peaks a bloody red. Smoke still rose from the ridge. The forest stood silent, brooding. Then, just before the tailgate slammed shut, I saw it. High up, near the tree line where the battle had raged, perched on a jagged outcrop, silhouetted against the crimson dawn. Tall, slender, motionless, watching the convoy. Watching us dot its silver eyes caught the first direct rays of the sun, flashing, like cold fire for an instant, before it turned and vanished into the rocks. The engine roared. The truck lurched forward, carrying us away from the Nightmare Mountain. The soldiers inside the truck with us didn't speak. They just stared ahead, faces blank with shock and something else. A deep, unshakable fear. As we rattled down the Elm Mountain Road, leaving the Valley of Shadows behind, I knew the war wasn't over. It had just found a new front. And the mountain, with its ancient pines and silent rocks, hadn't forgotten us. The creatures hadn't forgotten us. We had seen. We had survived. And in their cold, alien minds, It might make us more than just witnesses. It might make us targets. Or worse, it might make us. Interesting. The dawn brought light, but no warmth. Only the chilling certainty that the world was far stranger and far more dangerous than we had ever dreamed. And somewhere, high in the thinning air, Silver Eyes watched the retreating trucks, holding the memory of our terrified faces in their ancient, unblinking days. The mountain had shown its teeth, and we had barely escaped its bite.